News from the world of sports.
All right, we did have a big piece of news that just came out, and it's going to definitely relate to fantasy football. That is, Michael Penix is going to be on IR and done for the rest of the season. And you got Kirk Cousins coming in; he's going to be playing for the rest of the season. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about this. What's the fantasy relevance, and is Kirk Cousins going to be able to carry any of these guys? Because you also had Drake London, who's most likely going to be missing some time as well. So a couple of fantasy questions with this one. Like I was saying. Who's the next man up? And secondly, is Kirk Cousins worth a pickup, or is it just past that that injury's too much for him?
Well, quite frankly, if you're at this point in your league and you need to pick up a quarterback, you're in trouble. I would just say that outright.
Unless you're playing 2 QB league.
Yeah, that's fair. But even then, I don't think Cousins is warranting a top 25. I'd rather play Shook than him, just to give you a comparison point into quarterback league. So, as I said before, you really want to look at the running backs with a subpar quarterback play. And this is a spot where I think Bijan already went off. You saw it go off last week. I think that just continues. Algier is someone that I definitely would like to look into. When you look at the Atlanta situation overall, the next time you ever see Pitts fight for a ball that's in the air will be the first time Pitts ever puts fighting for a ball in the air on game film tape.
Since Florida.
I don't even know if he did it then. I'm not enough with college to know it, but that guy sits back and waits for a ball to come to him every single time, and then boom, it gets slacked away in front of his face constantly. Because in Florida, he was the fastest man on the field. In the NFL, he's not. So that being said, I'm already very anti-Pitts. I'm not going to jump on that now. But there's a lot of people that are trying to push that narrative that you should because of Mooney and London's situation, saying basically Pitts is the only man left standing. And I would rather have Algier than Pitts, or really, he's my number 2 Falcon right now in terms of the ball touchers. And obviously Bijan number 1 and Algier number 2, because even if you get that situation where Mooney is kind of okay, kind of not okay, supposedly he's had a collarbone issue since training camp, but they never reported it. Mm-hmm. We did a size before. I want to bring one up here right now. You guys remember around this time last year, Bijan was never on the injury report, but never set foot on the field. He just sat on the sideline. Yep. There was all these conspiracies, like he must have hooked up with the coach's daughter or something, and that's why he didn't play.
Yep.
The reason
they were saying that he had COVID too, and they don't want to put him out there.
Yeah, all that stuff. Atlanta, except for maybe the Belichick era Patriots, is possibly the best or worst, depending on your viewpoint, of exploiting the injury requirements and designations. And because of that, they are really tricky to put a confident bet on, in my opinion. But this is another example. Like Mooney would be the guy you would want to own, but I can't tell you with confidence that he's all right. So with that being said, I'm definitely not going to be diving into a number 3 or 4 into a situation in Atlanta with a backup quarterback. So again, the fantasy implication for me is bet the under and take Bijan and Algier, because all they can do is run the ball and get outfield with a defense that's kind of crumbling. So that would be what I would say about the Penix situation involved with fantasy.
Yeah.
Besides the fantasy relevance of it, just as an NFL fan, Penix, this is the first time this has happened to him. This is going to be his 3rd ACL tear. What's long term with Penix, you thinking here?
Well, when Penix came out of Washington, I basically thought he was the lefty version of Phillip Rivers. He had a very similar throw, very similar statue, and I thought that, like I said, it would have worked out, but you can't overcome injury. And there's a very real chance that he just might be done. I mean, let's face it. We already know that Justin Fields and Kyler Murray are never playing another snap in the NFL again. That's all but been determined. And I hate to say it, he's in his 2nd or 3rd year, but Penix is going down that road unless he's able to become a really happy guy who's cool with being a backup like Jameis Winston. But I don't see how Atlanta is going to be able to stick with him, except for I take that back. They're going to have to. They already traded away their 1st-round pick next year. So he's coming back, but with his injury, he's not going to be ready for training camp. I mean, ACLs heals faster and faster, but they don't heal in 7 months. So with that being said, he's certainly not going to be on my radar for picking up next year. And for Atlanta in general, they have themselves really a a golden opportunity given the fact the rest of that division is horrible, except for Tampa. You could have a chance to step into that 2 seed over and over and over again. But they kind of lost it here. And if Moore can turn New Orleans around, they might always just be the Jets and never be relevant. And that's the thing. To give credence to that statement, if you look over the last 5-year stretch, last 10-year stretch, last 15-year stretch, 25 years, and 30-year stretch, at each 5-year increment, the Atlanta Falcons defense is last in the league in sacks, pressures, and turnovers. Every single one of those increments. There's just something about that organization that you can't overcome when you always lose a turnover differential. The most important thing in stat, and their defense doesn't help them, and now their offense just lost the signal caller with no opportunity of getting a new one for at least a season and a half. So,
what about you, G Mike? How you feeling, man? What do you think this is going to mean for the Penix future and future of the Falcons, man, in general?
Well, I do kind of agree with the fact that the Falcons are cursed. I mean, they were leading in the Super Bowl 20-3.
Mm-hmm. Best OC ever.
That went overboard quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But just this year with Michael Penix, man, it sucks. He's going to be down with a knee injury. The good thing is that he's young, so be able to recover faster. Hopefully he comes back better. We saw Adrian Peterson. He came back and he was an all-top dog and rushed for more than 1,000 yards and probably one of his best seasons of his career, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just one dude out of so many that have got an ACL tear. So we'll see with that. But Kirk Cousins fitted in. With the fantasy implications, I understand the risk it is with taking Darnell Mooney, but I think if you're a manager out there and you need a flex, you need if you have 2 flexes and you need a wide receiver 3, I'd say just pick him up because the way that Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney last year were cooking was crazy. Like that connection there was better than Cousins and Pitts. Cousins in London, Cousins in Bijan, Cousins and Cousins. It was just awesome. So I would
you're
say
100% right. There's credence to it. It's just a risk because of the injury part. But no, I mean there's nothing wrong with that. But also Mooney should be on roster. He shouldn't be on waivers. So I don't know if I'm going out of the way to trade for him. I would blow some fab on him, but I would not trade for him.
Yeah, definitely pay some fab on him, 100%. I mean, that connection with Kirk Cousins, it was just great. And you need him for a flex, I would say put him in there, right? But just for the Falcons, moving forward, man, they're going to need Penix, man, because next year, like let's say they go and they do something crazy like they did last year and draft the QB in the first round of their draft, and they do that again this upcoming year, it wouldn't be smart because there's no really good QBs that are coming out of college,
especially in the second round because they don't have their first round. Yeah,
exactly. In the second round because they don't have the first. Exactly. So
I would imagine what they're forced to do is they're stuck with using Cousins next year to start it off. I mean, they gave him a 3-year contract, so he's still on the books for next year, and it from its structural standpoint makes the most sense. Keep the 2 of them together. Clearly, they're okay enough as teammates. Apparently, Cousins is like the nicest guy in the world, so I would keep them there. He's gracefully taken the bench already and just let him know up front that this is what's going to happen. And that would probably be what they have to do. And I guess the reality is you got to hope that you don't play Tampa while he's scheduled to be hurt next year. Hope the schedule makers give him a pass there because that whole division comes down to can they beat Tampa twice? I mean, if you talk about the Atlanta Falcons moving forward, that's the question. They got to go 4-2 in their division, sweeping Carolina and get Tampa.
I've been impressed with Carolina, though. Honestly, I think Carolina's been having a pretty quietly decent season. They've won some games that I've been more impressed with. I think Bryce Young is finally kind of figuring it out a little bit. Canales and him are kind of getting on the same page. Rico, I think, is going to probably stick around. They're probably going to give him some decent money, even though they did just pay Chuba Hubbard. I kind of like what Carolina's doing. Teddy McMillan, that was a great pickup for him. Leggett has been a huge letdown fantasy-wise and just NFL-wise. He hasn't really done much. Coker was supposed to be something to be bragging about, and it just hasn't really panned out, really. But I like what Carolina's doing, so I think it's going to be interesting to see come down the stretch. I mean, hell, Tampa Bay's been losing the last couple. Carolina's creeping their way up in a weird way here too, so.
They certainly are. So Carolina, I'm going to draw this parallel here, is a lesser degree of the same problem I'm going to talk about with Chicago in a minute. But the thing with Carolina is that the coach realized the only way we're going to really win is we got to, even though he was the first pick overall, we're not going to let him loose. We're not going to let him cook, as to use the Russell Wilson analogy. And they have a good run blocking line. They just flat out looked at the ingredients they had and they used them. They have one of the best run blocking lines in the league. It can rival Detroit in that department. And they handed the ball off. And Rico Dowdle is a speed, one-cut guy who, if you see a hole, he can run fast. And eventually he's going to break down and get broken. But it hasn't happened yet, and the fantasy things will be gold. For those preparing for next season, I get that's a little early yet, the kid from Texas that they drafted who's tore his ACL next year will be that starting back next year, and he should be your sleeper already. Pencil him down for Carolina's world. So I like where they're at. You mentioned specifically Coker there. Coker was really one of my big guys entering into this, and then last season. I really liked where he was at. But you got to recognize super low pick, and from their standpoint, when they draft Tet in the first round, it's really easy to push this guy to the back burner because we haven't invested in him. And that's effectively what's happened. It's not that Coker's skills have diminished or he's looking worse on tape or anything. He's just not getting the opportunities because Tet's on the field. And you draft someone first overall, you better put him on the field. It's just they made that conscious choice as a front office. Personally, I would not have done that, but that's what they did, and that's fine. And that's looking forward. If I'm looking at Carolina, what I really would like to focus on is how to find the next version of Sam Darnold. Some quarterback who had pedigree went to study underneath one of the two masters, either San Francisco or the Rams, and then turned out being a dude somewhere else. So that answers Mac Jones, for the record, for everyone's keeping track of this. Wherever he ends up next year, he will be a stud. And if I were Carolina, I would strongly look at that to try to get that next wave of Sam Darnoldism and try to build a team around it, because I am not sold at all on Bryce Young, despite the fact that they are the team that eliminated my suicide poll this year when they beat the Packers. But that's a digression.